1. For context, I had been playing with this DM for about 3 months, and he wanted to hold a Halloween one-shot. He had said that if you wanted to make your own character you could, but he could also make your character for you. I, of course, wanted to make my own character because I love to make characters. Because we had been playing together, I did have a character with this DM, Ace. Ace was an Aasimar Bard Phalok multiclass with a grudge against the gods, notably Zeus, who was his father and made it his life's mission to punch Zeus in the face. He wasn't that wise and tended to do reckless things that weren't all too thought through because of it, such as trying to jump over a 5-foot radius fountain, or go into the woods looking for a warlock to help get him a patron. Because it is important for the story, Ace had red hair, in what I called an Otome tone hairstyle, tan skin and forever closed eyes. Think Ranpo from BSD. Being a bard, he was also pretty peppy, taking care of his appearance, but was also one of the twinkiest twinks who ever did twink. So I go over to his house and hang out, and we decide we will create the new character for the one-shot. And here is where my woes began. Right off the bat, the DM said that you could not play the same classes or race you were playing in the main campaign. That kind of sucked, because I really did enjoy playing a bard, but I was not going to argue with that, so I propose a wizard, which the DM agrees to at the time. So we decide to work on the personality and face claim because, well, it would have combat. It would also have a decent amount of RP, so focus on personality first. We looked through Pinterest for a face and a pink tiefling that was very pastel, and I thought was cute, and I have a character idea. Oh, I have an idea. A wizard who plays really ditzy, so people will underestimate her, but is actually extremely smart and observant. No, that's way too similar to Ace. What? How? Ace is kind of dumb, but is actually really charming, so smart in that way. You would be playing a character who is kind of dumb, but actually really smart. I was kind of a pushover, still am actually, so do not argue and think of a new personality that I cannot remember. I think a kind of pyromaniac. And I start picking spells. I was thinking a fire and ice theme for the character, even if fire might be a bad idea because of an encased building, only to learn that we already have a character who sort of fills that niche, so I decide to switch it up. I have a new idea for a character to start over, a mad scientist type of character, who I think was going to be an artificer. The DM really likes the idea, and we start looking for a face. The DM pulls out a few faces, but I'm not completely sold on them. And then I have an idea of my own. I pull up an image of the wax artist from IDV before he became the wax artist in his intro trailer, because the trailer had just been released. For anyone who's not heard of the game or who hasn't seen the trailer, the wax artist has long hair that flows freely, pale skin, and a monocle and a slightly muscular build. A twunk is the most accurate way to say his build. I show the DM this image as well. You cannot use that. Huh? Why not? He's the same kind of pretty as Ace, you gotta pick something else. Once again, me being a pushover, I bow down and scrape most of the concept, but still decide to go with the mad scientist idea. However, this time as a cleric because the party needs a healer. We are quickly able to find the face of Vex from Critical Role because it fit the character, and I couldn't even just pick a name. After so much back and forth of picking a name, I'm finally allowed to pick one. Pandora. Things went pretty smoothly after that, but the fact it took that long, well, I should have left that group then. I did leave that group's main campaign after a lot of other stuff. Later, I did learn more about his ideas of making characters, such as the fact that don't think of character concepts during the campaigns, do not even try to talk about them, because then you will want to play them, and anytime character concepts would even come up, he would aggressively shut them down, saying no, no matter what. For fandom RPs, I have quite literally been playing the same character for 6 years now. When he had proposed the idea for the next campaign, while this one was still running, an evil campaign where he would be doing quests based on a deck of cards, I had a concept. though later he decided to make 2 different groups and I was moved to the non-evil campaign, where I was allowed to tell him my concept because I couldn't play it anyway, of a human fiend warlock. And he promptly told me, "Yeah, I wouldn't have let you play another charisma-based character." I am now the DM for my own party and let my characters do basically any concept they want to do, because they have a lot of fun ideas, even if they do like to play the same classes. I have one player who has played 3 rogues out of 5 characters, and another one who has played 5 wizards with 1 sorcerer, and one who constantly makes new character concepts and is excited to play them, but also loves the character she currently plays. 2. This happened about 10 years ago when I was in a rather epic campaign, played over the course of about 2.5 years in a persistent setting. Plot: an incredibly powerful Dracolich, imbued with an aspect of an evil god, tried taking over the world with his undead armies. It was my first campaign with these guys, but it was awesome. The GM knew how to capture our hearts and feelings. Amazing role-playing ensued. Memorable moments happened and all. I played a female wizard, and others were mostly martial characters. Due to the nature of our enemy being magical, there was quite a spotlight on my character, as I was the only one really trained in the skills to research this. Also, a few other predicaments happened that I was able to solve with unforeseen use of my magical spells, which might have made a few other players feel uncomfortable. Now, during the campaign, over the course of 2.5 years real time, we forged alliances and weapons to use in the climactic battle against our enemy and his undead hordes, while also researching his origins and bond to the god. While doing the latter, it turned out that in all likelihood his link to the god was so strong, he may just turn out to be completely invulnerable, and all our combined efforts to defeat him might be doomed. Our research was not entirely conclusive, but it might be possible to cut the link with the evil god before the battle by transferring it upon yourself. However, that would involve making a pact with the evil god and selling your eternal soul, which, of course, was out of the question for pretty much all the god-fearing characters. That is all except my wizard, but I was unable to tell my comrades about my plans, as they would surely have slain my character on the spot for even thinking about it. So I talked with the GM in private, and he was thrilled by the idea. Ran a solo mission in secret with me about forging a pact with the evil god, and I prepared some sequestered spells to use during the battle. The day of the battle came, and armies of tens of thousands came together to defeat the Dracolich and his armies. During the epic battle with the hordes, our enemy made his appearance, and with valiant effort, we were able to bring it down to the ground. But we were not actually dealing any kind of significant damage to it. That was when my wizard invoked the pact she made in the night before to take the aspect of the demon upon herself. It worked. The aspect was transferred to my character in a literal light show of special effects, and, almost as expected, all my former friends turned around and targeted my character with their strongest attacks. That is when she invoked the sequestered spells prepared beforehand, hiding behind a force wall and teleporting to safety, the evil god's aspect still inside of her. The Dracolich and his armies fell swiftly after, but the former friends of my character swore revenge on her for betraying them. All in all, an amazing campaign, and in the end, the heroes saved the day, and my old character, now a possible future antagonist, surely soon to be overpowered by the god's influence, ruled over newly resurrected undead somewhere far away. The end? So, we were about to start the new campaign. I rolled up a new character, a roguish non-spellcaster this time, as I didn't want to be the focus yet again. When we met for the first session of the new campaign, the other players gathered and let me know that they decided I will no longer be part of this group, nor any other group any of them played in. Their reason being, I had shown my true colors by forging a pact with their enemy, so they would never be able to trust any character I played anymore. Furthermore, I was informed they have decided to remove my old character from history of the campaign world, and retcon that their old characters defeated the Dracolich on their own terms. The GM later told me in private that he was outvoted by the other players, and that he really loved what I did. In fact, it would never have been possible for all our combined efforts to take the dragon down had I not done this. There originally were other ways to defeat our enemy, but we did not go that route for various reasons. But the other players were too adamant in their position, and he didn't want to lose his group. So joining the others and kicking me out was the way of least resistance. I was pretty devastated at that time, as the roleplay and interaction I had with this group was so amazing, but I got over it eventually. So in the end, my character saved everybody by pretty much turning herself to the dark side, and I got booted from one of my favorite groups for it. 3. Hey everyone, this happened somewhat recently but was difficult for me to deal with, but wanted to sit with it before sharing it, even if some of the details are now fuzzy. This is also an active campaign, and while the problem player infuriated me to no end, I think they had a lot of issues they needed to work through, and I bear them no ill will. So please don't call them out to harass them or anything if you know them. I just needed to get this off of my chest. This campaign had a large number of players to start, but the most noteworthy ones in this story are myself, Dave, and the DM. I've DM'd more games than I've played, so when an interesting-looking 5e campaign in a homebrew world came up from a newer DM on Discord, I hopped at the chance to join. We had a good amount of time to socialize and work on our characters before the game. I really wanted to do something unique and interesting, so I played a delusional kobold that thought they were a dragon. We did some reflavoring but kept things mechanically the same, so for instance, burning hands came from my mouth. Everyone seemed pretty chill, but there was one person that was far more active on the server than everyone else, Dave. Dave had some kind of job, we never figured out what this was, where they weren't allowed to be on a computer but could talk and speak out loud, so would frequently ask people to go on voice or do calls with them. I know we were going to be speaking to everyone once the game started, but as all my prior experience was in person, it still made me a bit uncomfortable to do a voice call with someone one-on-one. So while I didn't mind chatting with them solo, I kept making excuses for doing the call. Session 1 seemed fine. They did things that kept drawing attention to their character, and would push the DM to allow them to do certain things in their background and backstory that didn't make sense in the DM's homebrew setting. Nothing too major, but stuff like, "It says I can sleep at the guard post and the city is part of my background. I'm a guard in this city, and I can sleep there and bring some other people, right?" There's not really any organized military or martial presence in this small town. "But it says right here in my background that I can do it." And that sort of repeated until the DM relented. This was the start of a pattern. So for the session, they messaged me saying, "Hey, I have this great magic item I will be giving myself before the next session." I was a little confused that they were messaging me instead of the DM, but I figured they were just trying to brainstorm before approaching them. Holy cow, Batman. The description of what this magical item could do was 2 whole pages. I crunched some numbers and quickly realized that this magic item was not only capable of keeping the whole party consistently healed, it could one-shot a Tarask. I was a bit flabbergasted and pointed out that this was capable of killing, as a bonus action, the highest published CR monster in the game, and they responded with, "Yeah, I know. That was one of the things I wanted to do when I built it." Some brief background on the DM's world and the campaign. This was a very low magic setting, and we all started at level 3. In terms of magic items, we've so far come across catnip spell scrolls, a coin of delving, a cloak of billowing. So I figured maybe they were just unfamiliar or awkward, and they were so eager. So I tried to help them. I thought about what they wanted to do conceptually with their item, and created something that had some level-based scaling and was fairly effective, but far more balanced and in line with what someone might have at level 3 in a campaign, and figured with DM approval and maybe some sort of quest, it could be acquirable. I told them that their idea was pretty overpowered, especially for level 3, and suggested the more balanced item to them. The description only took 1 paragraph. They responded that the item was totally useless and I didn't hear about them until the next session. This is where things went totally off the hook. Since the DM allowed him to be a guard and bunk with a couple of other party members there, he used this as a quest hook. The head of the guards gave him a quest and he went to wake up the other party members who stayed with him. Half of us stayed behind at an inn. The group wanted to do some downtime shopping, socializing this session, so they were off to the market. The DM asked them, "Are you going straight there or going to the inn first to get the rest of your party?" "No, we're going straight there." "Are you sure? The rest of the party is still there." "Yes, we're going to the market." They bought a gust spell scroll and didn't realize that as a fighter they weren't able to use it. He went to a blacksmith and asked them to make a set of tonfa. It didn't really make sense in the setting for the blacksmith to have any idea what they were referring to, but Dave kept pushing and eventually the DM decided that if he can draw up the specifications really well, maybe the smith or another party member proficient in smithing could make it, but that it would be difficult to roll and would have to succeed on multiple checks. He eventually goes back to the tavern and draws up multiple specs with a string of 17 plus rolls. He then engages in persuasion rolls, another string of 17 plus rolls, to convince other party members to buy those specs, and his cantrip scroll and changes the prices each time. But nobody wants to metagame, so he just scams the party. This takes hours. Some people got chances to interact and play D&D, but the camera was always following them, so to speak. After a skill change and an immense amount of 17 plus rolls on Dave's end, they get their tonfa. They proceed to tell everyone about all the qualities and stats of it. It winds up being this wish list of weapon traits, bonus damage dice, and bonus AC. The DM tries to stop him and tells him that he needs to figure out what its stats and properties are. But Dave insists that he already had this conversation with the DM, and they told him this weapon could have all these properties, and that he should stand by his previous conversation. I made up some reason to head directly to the market, something I had forgotten. Another player complained that I was talking over them in the previous session. I felt bad about this, as this isn't something I want to do to another player. We figured that it was half I spoke strongly and confidently, conditioned to do as part of my job, and them having a quiet microphone. So I tried to be more careful about using my meeting voice, and I turned everyone else's volume down and turned theirs to max, and it seemed resolved. The reason I mentioned this is because I still felt bad, so I wanted to give gifts to all the other party members. I spent most of the week planning this out, so I needed to get to the market before the end of the session. We essentially just had this starting gold and equipment, so I had to get creative to make meaningful gifts for the rest of the party, and it took up most of my starting equipment and all of my starting gold. As Dave heard me doing this, Dave decided to say, "Hey everyone, let's plan out how our party will handle finances. Let's leave out the OP because they're selfish and greedy." They proceed to plan and vote on how to handle finances. Then proceeded with, "Also, I have this quest. Let's discuss it and plan out how to proceed with it now before OP gets back." I was pretty livid at this point. I had essentially sat out all session due to his decisions and deliberately excused from roleplay moments and campaign decisions, etc. I realized my character also had every reason to be pissed with the information they had available. So as I returned and Dave announced the decisions the party had already made. I challenged them on their behavior over the day. They responded with, "Well, you're a greedy dragon, so I know you're bad with money. I don't even need to guess, I just know that you spent all your money at the market. That proves I'm right. In fact, on our next quest, I can just tell the quest giver that you didn't participate and just keep your reward." Then things got weird. I tried to ignore him and went around to the rest of my party, bestowing gifts to them. They were mostly silly things. A kobold's best attempt to make a scented candle, some tinkerer's tools for the warforged, a chess set for the scholar, etc. Dave interrupted pretty frequently for rolls to determine if I was good or evil. It didn't make much sense to me at the time, but now I'm fairly certain they were trying to justify attacking me by proving I'm the opposite alignment of whatever they were. They kept persuading the DM until they finally let them do a series of rolls for it, and lo and behold, more 17+ rolls, culminating in a 19. The DM decided he succeeded, and asked me to tell him about my backstory and alignment. Here's the thing, I didn't really flesh out the whole backstory yet. I figured I could develop it as the character develops through play. I tried to share what I had come up with so far, and kept being pressed for more, before I put my foot down and said, "Look, I don't care how well you rolled. You can't read my backstory and my character's inner thoughts with a skill check." DM finally agreed with me, and we ended the session. They took off, but some of us stayed on the call to chat. Then Dave says, "You should never have tried to stand up to my character. Kobolds are cowardly. You're not playing your character correctly." I glanced at my character sheet and pointed out I had the kobold legacy trait, Defiance, which gave me an advantage against being frightened, so I don't think I needed to play them cowardly. Then they dropped their next line. "You know I could kill your character anytime I wanted. You wouldn't be able to do anything to stop me." This wasn't one-on-one or anything either. This was in front of other party members. I laugh it off, but I'm a little uncomfortable. He wasn't very knowledgeable about the game, and I was pretty confident in my tactics and character build, so I wasn't too worried if they just attacked me out of the blue. But they always rolled exceptionally high, and could go for my character in their sleep. I was getting worked up, so I made an excuse and logged off. As the week progressed, it looked more and more likely that they were going to get an OP magic item, and I kind of lost it. I went on a bit of a rant and told both him and the DM I really think it's bad to give him this item because it's very powerful, and he has already threatened to kill my character. I realized something at the time that I suspect is a surprise to zero of you out there. He rolled physical dice. It's not something I had even considered, but suddenly, I was incredibly suspicious of him not rolling below a 17 that session. I started mentally planning contingencies of what preparations I'll be making to protect myself in messaging the DM, in order for Dave not to metagame around them. At this point I had a reality check. What was I even doing? This wasn't fun anymore. I had decided I would probably quit, but also went back and just wrote a heartfelt message about what I felt was antagonistic from him, how it made me feel as a player, and potential steps we could take toward a resolution. Then I muted the server for 24 hours and tried to mentally prepare myself for telling them that I was no longer interested in continuing. I return and I'm shocked and surprised. A lot had transpired in those 24 hours. I had gotten a couple of messages of support from the DM and some other party members. Other party members had started sharing their own grievances regarding Dave and how uncomfortable they were feeling. Dave did not respond at all well to any of this, and blamed everyone except for himself. My favorite justification he made, that nobody seemed to buy, is that he had already messaged me, and that I was all right with everything. No. Things were getting heated and several people were really upset, and the DM decided to just pull the trigger and kick him. His character became an NPC and was later discovered dead in a ditch in a following session. So that's my horror story. Thanks for listening to the end. Some of the problems and issues other party members had with Dave were pretty shocking and warrant a story all on their own. But this has gone long enough, and I'll leave it to them to tell their own stories if they choose to. 4. I've been playing in an online game, mistake number 1, via Roll20, mistake number 2, of D&D 5e, mistake number 3. I recently left that game after a falling out with the DM, who I had known for some time had a history of emotionally abusing his players. His response to my departure was very telling to myself and the other players about how insecure he is when he loses control of any aspect of his games. I joined the game of 5e that promised a magical college setting similar to Strixhaven. The first session made it clear that this was not quite accurate, as the setting of the campaign more closely resembled a high school sitcom in a modern-day setting, just with 5e stuff plastered over it. I didn't have a problem with this, but I did immediately notice an issue with how the first session was run. It was almost entirely roleplay between the players and respective close NPCs portrayed by the DM. All of the interactions had a hostile tone to them, despite not all of us indicating that kind of relationship between PCs and NPCs. This would become a pattern as the game progressed. Over several sessions, the DM would frequently push the player characters into scenarios where he had absolute control of the circumstances, including what we as characters could choose to do. I thought this was just a clumsy way of railroading the story, but soon these engagements started happening out of character as opposed to in character, and it became clear that the relationship we were expected to have with our DM was a hierarchical one, with him at the top. I wasn't the only one who noticed this. One of the other players, Sarah, spoke to me privately regarding not only her discomfort with the game, but also issues from a previous game she and the DM shared that several people abandoned due to the latter being overly hostile in-game. She shared that he would frequently message her about the other players not role-playing the characters they pitched. I received no such complaint from him myself, but I did see the DM use our roleplay sessions to force my character into a specific role and archetype I had made clear I was not interested in. This was when things got bad. The DM began to undercut the party during combat. He kept information that we, the players, would logically need to know to roleplay and coordinate appropriately private, and frequently chastised us for the choices we made roleplaying. Not for any stated reason, just due to the fact that he found what we were doing to be boring or uninteresting, despite the fact that we as the players were enjoying ourselves. He frequently would make passive-aggressive comments about us doing silly things in character, not following the narrative paths he wanted but didn't tell us to pursue. We were mocked for not picking up on his unclear signals, kicked from calls for sassing him during games, and held to account for jokes made out of character, as if everything was said as a personal attack against him. These were soft methods of control he was using to guide our behavior in a dishonest and artificial way. I also learned from Sarah that he was commuting outright emotional abuse to her in private, screaming at her in private chats, implying that any disagreement with his conduct was an attempt to armchair psychoanalyze him. He used very demeaning language regarding therapy in this context, and claiming that any request for space or time from her was equivalent to her abandoning him. I told her this sounded manipulative, and she agreed, but we both decided to stay involved for the sake of the other players. Which leads us to yesterday. During a combat session, I attempted to cast a spell that had a cone effect, with the specific intention of hitting one target and not my allies. The DM, before I had shown where I was aiming, drew out what the spell would hit and began calculating damage. I objected, saying that I wanted him to aim in a direction where my target was hit from an angle, not straight on, which isn't raw. But I had had experience with DMs allowing that in the past. The DM proceeded to move my character, draw a new line, and without offering any explanation on his ruling, said that was not what I was doing. This upset me, as I believed this to be another form of him taking away my agency. He only explained how he ruled after I got angry with him for moving my token, and chose to speak down to me as if this was him offering me a solution, as opposed to simply deciding what I was doing. I foolishly escalated, saying I didn't appreciate the way he was speaking to me, and he proceeded to set me against the party, saying that if I really wanted to make my attack as I originally had, he would retaliate against the rest of the group and use that ruling aggressively against us in future fights. After taking a few moments to calm myself after this, I made my turn and let combat proceed. When the combat ended, roleplay began, but I had moved away from the table to process my emotions. A few hours after the session ended, I sent a message in our Discord that I did not appreciate the controlling and emotionally manipulative methods the DM was using and felt as though my agency was being subverted. I left the group after that, blocked the DM on Discord to avoid him harassing me in chat, and thought that would be the end of it. The next day, though, Sarah messaged me again saying that my message had been deleted by the DM and replaced with a message from him that said I had some fucked up shit and bailed overnight. He apparently also had been whining about me to her all night as well, though she only noticed in the morning. I learned later that he had sent me DMs on Roll20 that I didn't see because I don't check my notifications on Roll20, saying that the entire group believed I was at fault and a burden on the game. Untrue, I spoke to the others, and they at worst believed we were equally to blame. That my attempt to smear him would never have worked because he had more control over them than I did, also untrue and irrelevant since I had not tried to do so, and that I should seek professional help. A tasteless sentiment at best. I also learned he had blamed my anger with him on me being transgender, likening me to other people who had left games of his before for similar reasons, and asserting that must be why we're all unhinged. His message to me made it clear that he was trying to have the last word, as it were. He refused to let my words speak for themselves and messaged me privately that the players were on his side entirely, implying he had beaten me in some way. He spoke at length, not about the issues I had, but about how my reaction must be indicative of several mental problems, and I should seek help for my issues. I have a therapy regimen, FTR, and I find the use of therapy as a pejorative to be tasteful at best, and hostile to mental health treatment at worst. I can't help but see this as him being insecurely holding on to his sense of power over me, asserting his place at the top of the hierarchy. It was petty and pathetic, especially for someone at least 10 years my senior. Sarah has said that she is likely going to leave the game as well, once she can confirm the other players are safe to talk to about this. I fully expect the DM to blame me for destroying his game, but I think if my words were enough to shatter people's faith in him as a DM, that is his fault, not mine. 5. So, a while back, I was part of this year-long 5e campaign with a group of friends. We were stoked to embark on an epic adventure, man. But little did we know we were about to encounter a player who would turn our game into a bizarre death grips nightmare. This player, MC Ride, because that's what he insisted on being called, was obsessed with the band Death Grips to a whole other level. From the get-go, he made it clear that his character, a noble bard, was the embodiment of Death Grips' lyrics and persona. I mean, he even introduced himself by saying, "I'm a noble, and you can call me Lord MC Ride, bitch." Yeah, it was as cringe as it sounds. Now, in social situations, both in and out of character, MC Ride would interject Death Grips' lyrics randomly, always at an aggressively loud volume. Picture this. We're negotiating with a group of king's nobles, trying to find a diplomatic solution with the king, and out of nowhere, MC Ride blurts out, "Fucked a man with hips for Hulu." We all stared at him in disbelief, wondering what the hell just happened. It was like a train wreck, you couldn't look away. But it didn't stop there. As a bard, when MC Ride attempted to be charismatic, or even when he played music, he'd start yelling obscenities. I kid you not, this guy was dead serious about it. It was a cringe fest that would make even the most seasoned RPG players question their life choices. As the campaign progressed, and every bard inspiration given being accompanied by something like, "I light my torch and burn it, I am the beast I worship." Except, the dude is actually screaming into the mic. We all tried to talk to MC Ride, explaining that his constant interjections were disruptive and making everyone uncomfortable. But he brushed it off, being super serious and claiming it was all part of his character's authenticity. It was like dealing with a brick wall, except this brick wall was angrily screaming Death Grips lyrics in your face. Eventually, this became too much for the rest of us, and we decided to end the campaign prematurely. We couldn't take MC Ride's incessant Death Grips obsessions any longer. The game was supposed to be an immersive experience, not a cringe-inducing concert of inappropriate lyrics and aggressively awkward role-playing moments. So heed my warning. Be careful who you invite to your RPG campaigns. Sometimes the line between creativity and overzealous obsession can blur, and you might find yourself knee-deep in a perverse Death Grips nightmare that you never asked for. May your future RPG adventures be free from such horrors, and may the dice forever roll in your favor. Stay safe out there, and remember, not every bard needs to make the music come. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 20 Sided Dunce, RPG Stories, Episode 5. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do press the like button. And if you'd like to get future videos a little bit earlier, you can get them early through Patreon. The link is in the description, where you'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store where you can buy t-shirts, mugs, and various other cool things. Alright, now, as I don't think there's any other business, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is there a game that you've bought, so you own it, it's in your collection, and you want to play it, but you never ever seem to find the time to do it? I've got quite a few like that, but looking at my Steam list, I think probably Detroit Become Human. It's a game I really do want to play. I own it, it's sitting right there. I've barely started it. I'll make time for it one day, hopefully, but right now, just don't have the time, and I don't think I'm going to have the time for the foreseeable future. But let me know what some of yours are, if there are any, in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.